He thought I was home, waiting for his delayed flight call from Chicago. He had no idea I wasn't just a guest at the gala. I organized it. When the ballroom doors opened, he walked in with her. He saw me standing with my CEO, his face drained of color. And when his little lover asked who I was, he actually forgot my name. My name is Alara Vance. I stood in the grand ballroom of the colonnade, the weight of my emerald green gown a familiar comfort. The fabric was a deep, shimmering color, a deliberate choice. The soft murmur of conversations from 500 of the tech industry's brightest minds filled the air, a symphony I had orchestrated. This was not just any gala. This was the annual Astra Analytics Data Integrity Summit, my summit. As the Vice President of Strategy, this night was the culmination of a solid year of my life, the pivot point for my entire career. I was laughing at something my CEO, Dr. Eris Thorne, had just said, my champagne flute poised midway to my lips. He was a good man, a genuine mentor, and he was telling me how the board was already praising the event's flawless execution. That was when the main ballroom doors opened. The sudden shift in light, the brief influx of noise from the lobby, made me glance over. And there he was, my husband, Marcus. He was supposed to be in Chicago. He was supposed to be checking into his hotel at O'Hare, preparing for a high-stakes client meeting first thing in the morning. He had called me just that afternoon, his voice thick with performative regret, apologizing profusely that he would miss the biggest night of my career. He sounded so convincing, so genuinely heartbroken. He was not alone. His hand rested possessively on the waist of a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 27, poured into a tight black dress that left nothing to the imagination. She was smiling up at him, her expression proprietary, as he leaned in to whisper something in her ear, a smug, satisfied grin on his face. Then he looked up, scanning the room, and his eyes met mine. I have analyzed data streams for a living. I know how to watch for the precise millisecond a trend breaks, the exact moment a system fails. I watched it happen to my husband's face. The blood didn't just drain from it, it vanished, leaving a sickly, pale mask. His self-satisfied grin froze, cracking like thin ice. His shoulders tensed, his entire body going rigid. He looked, for one stunning moment, like a man who had seen a ghost. The woman, Chloe, felt him freeze. She stopped smiling and followed his line of sight directly to me. I didn't look away. I held his gaze, my expression perfectly pleasant. She leaned in, her voice a confused whisper that I couldn't hear but could read perfectly from across the room. "Marcus, who is that? Why is she staring at us?" I watched him. I watched his mouth open slightly. I watched the panic flicker behind his eyes, a frantic search for a word, for a name. He couldn't find it. For 3 full, agonizing, beautiful seconds, my husband of 10 years stared at his wife and completely forgot my name. Dr. Thorne, oblivious, was still speaking. "Ilara, did you hear me?" "Forgive me, Eris," I said, my voice perfectly steady. I finally broke eye contact with Marcus, turning back to my CEO. "I just saw someone unexpected arrive." I turned my head back toward the door. Marcus was still frozen, his companion now looking utterly bewildered. I smiled. It was not a smile of warmth or forgiveness. It was the smile of a strategist who has just watched her opponent walk directly into a perfectly laid trap. From across the room, I raised my champagne flute in a silent, chilling toast. The game had begun. 6 months ago, our life was perfect. Or rather, it was a perfectly curated illusion. We lived in a 4-story brownstone in Beacon Hill, with gas lamps flickering on the cobblestone street outside and an interior design featured in a glossy magazine. We were, by all accounts, the Boston power couple. I was the rising star at Astra Analytics, the data prodigy turning abstract numbers into company gold. He was Marcus Vance, a highly respected senior portfolio manager at Bayfront Capital, handling the fortunes of the city's old money. Our life was a strategic merger. We had agreed early on, over expensive cocktails at the Avery, that children were not part of our 10-year plan. Our careers were our babies, our ambition the thing we nurtured. We hosted dinner parties where the conversation was smart, the wine was vintage, and the networking was subtle but ruthless. We were a team. The first crack in the foundation appeared as a hairline fracture. It started with the late nights. Marcus, who had always been regimented, suddenly found his schedule at the mercy of a volatile market. He would text me at 7 p.m., then 8. "Still at the office. This quarter is brutal. I am an analyst by nature. I see patterns. It is my gift and my curse." I noticed the frequency increased. Tuesdays and Thursdays, almost every week. Then came the weekend business trips. "It's a huge new client in New York," he'd explained, packing an overnight bag. "They're demanding, but the commission will be astronomical. Think of that vineyard property we looked at." He always had a reason, a logical, plausible, airtight reason. He was a finance guy. His world was driven by unpredictable markets and demanding clients. I was a data scientist. I understood demanding projects. I accepted his explanations because rejecting them meant accepting a data point I wasn't ready to process. Then his phone, which had once been left casually on the kitchen counter, became an extension of his hand. It was always screened down, or in his pocket. He started taking calls in his home office with the door closed. When I asked who it was, he'd wave it off. "Just Harding," he'd say, naming his boss. Panicking about the futures market again. The real pivot, the classic deflection, began about 4 months ago. He started criticizing me. "You're always working, Alara," he said one night, pouring himself a whiskey while I reviewed vendor contracts for the summit. "You're here, but you're not present. You're obsessed with this event." It was brilliant, really. A textbook psychological maneuver. He was seeding the idea that I was the one creating the distance. He was making me feel guilty for my own ambition, the very ambition he always claimed to admire, and I, consumed by the sheer scale of the Data Integrity Summit, let the guilt land. I apologized. I promised to make more time after the event. The summit was my world. It was a massive undertaking, the single most important project of my career. A successful event would solidify my path to the C-suite. I was managing hundreds of details, from keynote speakers to international cybersecurity protocols. I was stressed, I was tired, and I was distracted. I didn't have the bandwidth to properly analyze the growing discrepancy in my own home. Marcus, meanwhile, became the image of the supportive husband. He'd rub my shoulders while I was hunched over my laptop at midnight. He listened patiently as I vented about catering logistics. "It's going to be incredible, Alara," he told me, just 2 weeks before the gala. He kissed my forehead, his voice sincere. "You're building an empire. I'm so damn proud of you." He was proud, he was supportive, and he was, I now knew, actively planning his betrayal, using the very event I was pouring my soul into as the perfect cover for his deception. He was counting on me being too busy to notice. He was counting on me being in Chicago, in my mind. He just never counted on me being the one holding the spotlight he was about to walk into. The illusion shattered exactly 4 weeks before the summit. It didn't happen with a scream or a slammed door. It arrived quietly, digitally, slipping past my corporate firewall at 2:17 in the afternoon. An anonymous email, sent from a Proton account to my work address. The subject line was empty. The body contained a single sentence. "He's not who you think he is. Check the penthouse in Seaport." I stared at the words until they blurred. There was no signature, no threat, just a simple, devastating instruction. Seaport, not the financial district, where his office was, not Beacon Hill, where we lived. Seaport. My first instinct was to call him, to demand an explanation. But I am not a woman who operates on instinct. I am a woman who operates on data. You do not confront a hypothesis without evidence. So, I closed the email, opened a new encrypted file on my personal drive, and began to collect data. That night, after he was asleep, or pretending to be, I logged into our joint financial portals. I ran a full audit going back 12 months. I was looking for hotel charges, extravagant dinners I wasn't at, jewelry receipts. There was nothing. Not a single misplaced dollar. Our accounts were pristine, balanced to the penny. He was meticulous. He was either innocent or he was far smarter than I had given him credit for. But people who build alternate lives always leave a data trail. They can hide the what, but they can rarely hide the where. I logged into our EasyPass account. It was linked to our joint credit card, an innocuous household expense I managed but rarely scrutinized. He took the Mercedes, our shared car, almost every day. The toll tag registered every time he crossed the Tobin Bridge or used the Ted Williams Tunnel. My screen filled with a spreadsheet of dates, times, and gantry locations. I cross-referenced the timestamps with my calendar and his late-night texts. The pattern emerged, stark and undeniable. On at least 3 nights a week for the past 5 months. On evenings, he claimed to be stuck at the office in the financial district. His EasyPass registered a toll entry into the Seaport Tunnel. He wasn't working late. He was commuting to a different neighborhood. The next day, I told my assistant I was taking a long lunch for a site visit. I drove the Mercedes myself, the same route he always took. The Seaport District was all new money, glass towers, and trendy restaurants. It was flashy, impersonal. It wasn't him. Or, perhaps, it was the him I didn't know. Check the penthouse, the email had said. I didn't have an address, but I didn't need one. I was looking for the newest, most expensive, most secure building. It took me 10 minutes. The echelon. It rose above the harbor, a monument to obscene wealth. I walked into the lobby, all marble and cold, minimalist art. I was dressed in my full VP armor, a tailored suit, and an air of absolute authority. I approached the concierge, a man in a crisp uniform. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice smooth. "I'm exploring options for a corporate relocation. I'm interested in your penthouse availability." The manager was called. He was eager, smelling a multi-million-dollar sale. "We only have one penthouse left for sale," he said, guiding me toward the elevators. "Our other penthouse 22B was purchased just a few months ago. The owner loves it." "Oh," I asked lightly, feigning polite interest. "A private buyer." "Yes, a Mr. Vance. From the finance world," the manager said, beaming. He was so decisive, knew exactly what he wanted. The name hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my smile perfectly in place. Vance, my name. His name. "That's lovely," I managed to say. It's always nice when a place feels like home. The elevator doors opened. As we stepped out, the manager, deep in his sales pitch, delivered the final fatal piece of data. He said it was the perfect city escape for him and his new wife. "It's just wonderful," he gushed. How much he and his young wife love the place. They're hardly ever here, but they seem so happy. His young wife. I am 35 years old. I am many things, but I am not, by any definition, his young wife. I knew then. It wasn't an affair. An affair is cheap hotels and secret texts. This was a life. He had built an entirely separate, parallel life, and he was using my name to do it. I didn't go back to our brownstone. I drove from Seaport, my hands perfectly steady on the steering wheel, my face a calm, neutral mask. The manager's words, his young wife, echoed in the silence of the Mercedes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I processed. I analyzed. And then I made a call. By 4 in the afternoon, I was in a secure video conference with Julian Croft. Julian is the most feared divorce attorney in Boston. You don't hire him to win a custody battle. You hire him to liquidate an adversary. He specializes in high net worth asset division, and his discretion is legendary. "I need you to run a full asset search," I said, my voice as flat as a spreadsheet. I need to know everything about a property at the Echelon, Penthouse Unit 22. B. I believe my husband, Marcus Vance, is connected to it. Julian, a man who had seen everything, simply nodded. I assume discretion is the priority. Discretion, I confirmed. And speed. Julian's office called me back in less than 24 hours. His paralegal sounded almost excited. Mr. Croft wanted you to see this immediately. A secured file appeared in my inbox. It wasn't a lease agreement. It was a deed of sale. The penthouse wasn't rented. It had been purchased. The closing date was 3 months ago. My breath hitched, but I kept scrolling. Then I saw the names on the title. Tenants in common. Marcus Vance. And a name I did not recognize, Chloe Davis. The betrayal was deeper, colder, more calculating than I could have imagined. This wasn't a sordid affair in a rented room. This was co-owned real estate. This was an investment. This was a parallel life, built brick by brick, right under my nose. He wasn't just cheating, he was building an exit strategy. Chloe Davis. The name was new data. I went to work. It took me less than 5 minutes on LinkedIn. There she was, Chloe Davis, 27 years old. Her profile picture showed a bright, eager, conventionally pretty face, and her professional history made the blood freeze in my veins. Title Junior Analyst, Employer Bayfront Capital. She worked for him. She was a junior analyst at his own firm. I knew Marcus's compliance handbook by heart. We had compared notes on our respective corporate policies. Bayfront Capital had a strict zero-tolerance policy on fraternization between senior management and direct subordinates. He was a senior portfolio manager. She was at the bottom of the food chain. He wasn't just risking his marriage. He was risking his entire career, his license, everything he had spent 2 decades building, all for a 27-year-old. The arrogance was breathtaking. But the final piece of the puzzle, the one that turned my grief into something cold and hard, was still missing. Where did the money come from? I went back to our financials. I had checked our joint checking and savings. Clean. But this time, I opened the file I rarely touched. Our joint brokerage account. It was our long-term nest egg. The account he managed. He was the finance wizard, after all. I trusted him. I was the data scientist. He was the markets guru. I logged in. I scrolled past the holdings, the blue chip stocks, the stable bonds. I went straight to the transaction history. And there it was. 3 months prior, a series of large-scale wire transfers, 3 of them, over a 5-day period. The transaction notes were bland. Capital call, private equity investment. The total was just over $400,000. I pulled up the sales deed Julian had sent. I looked at the mortgage documents. The down payment for Penthouse 22B. It matched. To the dollar. The air left my lungs. This was not his money. It was our money. Money I had earned from the bonuses at Astra. Money I had poured into that account, believing it was for our future. He had stolen from me. He had stolen my money to buy a home for his mistress. The shock was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a terrifying, crystalline clarity. He hadn't just broken my heart. He had insulted my intelligence. He assumed I was too busy with my summit, too distracted, too stupid to check the accounts he managed. He had made a fatal error in calculation. And in my world, a bad calculation does not just lead to a loss. It leads to annihilation. I did not say a single word. I did not confront him. I did not ask about Chloe Davis, or the penthouse in Seaport, or the $400,000 he had stolen from our future. Instead, I became the perfect wife, the perfect, supportive partner. I discussed his day. I listened to his fabricated stories about the market. I smiled. I kissed him goodnight, and I went to sleep in our bed in Beacon Hill, a cold, calculating fury my only companion. My focus returned to the summit, but now with a dual purpose. On the surface, I was the meticulous vice president of strategy, finalizing logistics, confirming speaker schedules, and polishing my keynote address. Every detail had to be flawless, but beneath that, I was a general planning a war. The summit was no longer just my career showcase, it was my battlefield. The ballroom at the colonnade was the territory, and I was rigging every inch of it in my favor. The opening salvo from his side came exactly 2 weeks before the event. He found me in the kitchen, where I was reviewing catering manifests. He approached with his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of profound devastation. "Ilara," he began, his voice heavy with counterfeit regret. "You are going to kill me." I turned, feigning mild concern. "What is it?" "Marcus. Harding is sending me to Chicago, that same week. He says it's unavoidable, a massive client emergency, and I'm the only one who can handle it." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "I have to be there. I'm going to miss the summit. I am so sorry. I know how much this meant to us." He looked genuinely heartbroken. He was a truly gifted performer. I arranged my own features into a mask of disappointment, softening it with understanding. I walked over and touched his arm. "Oh, Marcus, that's terrible. I was so looking forward to you being there." I let out a small put-upon sigh. "But I get it. Don't worry. Honey, work is work. We'll celebrate when you get back." "You're the best," he said, pulling me into a hug, relief washing over him. He thought he had done it. He thought he was clear. "Just promise me you'll call me that night," I said, leaning back. "Of course," he promised. The second I land. The moment he left for work the next morning, I began my real preparations. I went to my office, closed the door, and accessed the master guest list and event schedule. As the event host, I had absolute authority. My first email was to Mr. Harding, the CEO of Bayfront Capital. I sent him and his wife, Eleanor, a personal, formal invitation, upgrading them to our VIP tier. I explained that I was devastated Marcus couldn't make it due to his last-minute Chicago trip, but that I would be personally honored if they would sit at my head table as my guests. They accepted within the hour. My table, right next to the main stage. My second task was more creative. I called our event media partner. I told them I was adding a new special award to the roster, a one-time recognition. We would call it the Industry Rising Star Award, designed to honor an emerging talent in the Boston financial tech sector. My team, loyal and efficient, asked no questions. I told them I had a specific recipient in mind, a name that had been passed to me. I drafted the notification email myself. It was sent from a generic Summit Awards Committee address. It went directly to Ms. Chloe Davis at her Bayfront Capital email. The email was a masterpiece of ambiguity. It informed her that she had been selected for this prestigious award. It did not mention Astra Analytics, or the Colonnade, or me. Most importantly, it stated that her nomination had been championed by a senior mentor at her firm who wished to remain anonymous. I sat back, reading the words. I knew Marcus. I knew his staggering ego. He would see this as his own victory. He had not only secured a mistress, but he had elevated her. He, the great mentor. I knew he would not be able to resist. The temptation to show her off, to be the man who made her, would be too great. He wouldn't just take her to a gala. He would be escorting the guest of honor, and with his wife supposedly safe, hundreds of miles away in Chicago. He would believe he was untouchable. He would believe the night was about her. He had no idea the entire event was being re-engineered around him. The night of the summit. I hadn't prepared at home. I had booked a grand suite at the Colonnade, a clean, quiet, neutral space. It felt like the eye of the storm, the air still and heavy before the real chaos began. I stood in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting the straps of my gown. It was emerald green. The fabric was a heavy, luxurious silk that pooled at my feet. I had chosen it specifically. Marcus always hated this dress. He said it was too much, that it drew too much attention, that it made people stare. He was, of course, correct. Tonight. I wanted to be seen. I reached into the velvet box on the dresser and fastened the clasp of my father's diamond necklace. The stones were cold against my skin. He had left them for me, and I reserved them only for the most significant occasions of my life. I fixed the matching earrings, their weight a solid, grounding presence. I was armored. My keynote speech was laid out in a series of index cards on the mahogany desk. I picked them up, my hand steady. I read the first lines aloud to the empty room. "We are here tonight to discuss the paramount importance of transparency. We are here to affirm the non-negotiable value of integrity in the data we trust." My voice was clear, strong, and utterly devoid of emotion. I was going to speak about the catastrophic consequences of corrupted systems, of hidden variables, of the danger of trusting without verifying. It was a subject I was, it turned out, an expert in. As if on cue, my personal phone vibrated on the marble counter. I glanced at the screen. A text from Marcus. "Plane is about to take off. O'Hare is a total mess. This is nuts. I will call you the second I land in Chicago. So proud of you. Love you." The banality of his lie, the casual, "love you," tacked on at the end, was almost impressive. I felt a cold, hard knot tighten in my stomach. I tapped out a reply, my fingers moving quickly. "Safe flight, thinking of you." Then, I powered the phone off and dropped it into my handbag. No more distractions. I took the private elevator down to the ballroom floor. The doors opened, and the sound of 500 conversations washed over me. I stepped out, my posture perfect, my smile fixed. I was no longer a woman in a hotel room. I was Ilara Vance, Vice President of Astra Analytics, and this was my event. I moved through the reception, greeting guests, shaking hands, accepting congratulations. My CEO, Dr. Thorne, found me by the champagne tower. "Ilara, a triumph," he boomed, kissing me on both cheeks. "A true triumph. The board is thrilled." "We haven't even started. Heiress," I replied, smiling. Then, I saw them, my true guests of honor. "Excuse me, Heiress." I glided across the floor. "Mr. Harding Eleanor, I am so deeply glad you could make it." Mr. Harding, the CEO of Bayfront Capital, smiled warmly. His wife, Eleanor, squeezed my hand. "We wouldn't miss it. Ilara, though we're sorry to hear about Marcus." I arranged my face into a mask of polite disappointment. "Oh, I know. He is just devastated. He tried everything to get out of it, but this emergency in Chicago, well, you know how it is. He felt just terrible letting his team down." I watched Harding's face. The smile didn't fade, but a small line of confusion appeared between his eyebrows. He looked at his wife, then back at me. "Chicago?" he asked. "That's odd. He told my office he was taking personal leave this week. A family matter," he said. The air crackled. This was the first variable I had introduced into the system. I held his gaze and offered a small, indulgent laugh. "Oh, honestly, he probably just told me Chicago to sound important. You know how he is. A family matter, a work matter. It's all a blur with him." I touched his arm. "It means so much that you're here to represent Bayfront in his absence. Please, let me show you to our table. It's right at the front." The grand ballroom was a sea of black ties and designer gowns, a living, breathing organism of power and influence. The air buzzed with the static electricity of ambition. Every major player in the tech and finance sectors of New England was here. Over 500 leaders, investors, and innovators were packed into the opulent space I had so carefully designed, their conversations a dull roar under the glittering crystal chandeliers. The house lights dimmed, and a respectful hush fell over the crowd. The introductory video, a sleek production about the future of data, ended. My name was announced, and a warm, bright spotlight found me at the side of the stage. I walked out to the sound of sustained applause, my emerald dress shimmering under the lights. I stepped up to the podium, took a breath, and smiled. I was flawless. I was confident. I was captivating. I was the absolute, undeniable image of success. Every camera in the room, both for the press feed and the internal broadcast screens, was locked on me. "Good evening," I began. My voice, amplified, was steady and smooth, radiating authority. "We are here tonight because we believe in the power of data. We build our industries, our economies, and our futures on it." I paused, letting my gaze sweep across the front tables, over the CEOs, over the investors, over Mr. Harding. "But this power," I continued, "comes with a profound responsibility. Tonight, I want to talk about the consequences of bad data. I want to talk about the hidden dangers of trusting, without verifying." I was in complete command, the audience hanging on my every word. I was explaining the financial fallout of a corrupted algorithm when, in my peripheral vision, I saw them. The main doors at the far back of the ballroom opened, a sliver of bright lobby light cutting into the dim room. 2 people slipped in. They were late, clearly, and were trying to move unseen along the back wall, scanning the darkness for an empty table or a place to stand. It was him. It was Marcus. And on his arm, clinging to him with a smug, proprietary air, was Chloe. He was whispering to her, and she was giggling, covering her mouth like a teenager. He looked up, his eyes adjusting to the dim light, and his gaze swept the room. It traveled past the hundreds of attendees, past the stage, and then it found me, standing at the podium, holding the microphone, bathed in the spotlight. His body went completely, utterly rigid. The blood evaporated from his face, leaving a pale greenish tint. His mouth fell open. He looked, quite simply, like a man who had just seen his own death. He stopped walking, his hand still on her waist, frozen in time. I did not falter. I did not stop. I simply held his gaze from across the expanse of the room. I let the silence stretch. 1 beat, 2 beats. The entire room was quiet, waiting for me to continue my speech. The only sound was the hum of the ventilation. Then, I smiled. I leaned into the microphone. "Oh," I said, and my voice, amplified, boomed through the ballroom, cutting through the silence like a scalpel. "And it seems we have a few late arrivals." As if pulled by a single string, 500 heads turned in unison. The entire assembly pivoted, looking toward the back doors. They followed my gaze. The spotlight operators, thinking I was welcoming an honored guest, followed my cue. A brilliant, powerful beam of light flooded the back wall, illuminating the 2 of them, pinning them against the velvet ropes. They were trapped. Marcus was paralyzed, his eyes wide with a horror so profound it was almost comical. Chloe squinted in the sudden glare, her smile vanishing, replaced by a confused, deer-in-the-headlights terror. They stood there, exposed to everyone, to my colleagues, to my CEO, and, I noted with satisfaction, to Mr. Harding at the front table. "We are so glad," I said, my voice dripping with perfect polished hospitality, "that everyone could make it tonight." I concluded my keynote address on the absolute necessity of integrity, my gaze locked on the 2 shadows huddled at the back of the room. The applause was thunderous. It was a standing ovation. I smiled, touched my chest in gratitude, and walked down the steps of the stage. My CEO, Eris, moved to intercept me, his face beaming, ready to congratulate me. I held up a single finger, a silent 1 moment, and smiled, a promise to return. I did not go back to the head table. I did not look at Mr. Harding. I set my sights on the bar, where my husband and his mistress were desperately attempting to blend into the shadows, trapped between the catering station and a wall of attendees. I began to walk. Every step was measured. The sea of black-tie guests parted for me, offering congratulations as I passed. Brilliant speech, Ilara. Just stunning. I nodded and smiled at each of them, my eyes never wavering from my target. Marcus watched me approach. He was paralyzed, a statue of a man who had just seen a freight train rounding the bend. His hand, which had been on Chloe's lower back, was frozen in place. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. As I came within earshot, I saw the girl, Chloe, lean into him. Her face, which had been smug and excited upon entering, was now a mask of petulant confusion. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice a sharp, irritated hiss. "Who is that?" "She's coming right for us. Why is she walking like that?" He saw me closing in. I watched his mouth. He tried to form a word. He tried to warn her. He tried to say my name. Ilara. A simple, two-syllable name. His wife of 10 years. But in that moment, staring at me, at the ghost who was supposed to be in Chicago, he was incapable of speech. His jaw worked, but nothing came out. I stopped directly in front of them. The proximity was a shock. I smiled, a brilliant, dazzling smile. The perfect hostess. "Marcus," I said, my voice bright and full of delighted surprise. "You made it, my goodness." I put a hand to my chest. "Your flight from Chicago must have landed incredibly early. What an absolute miracle." "I was so convinced you were trapped at O'Hare." He flinched, the public, cheerful words hitting him harder than a slap. "Ilara," he croaked. His voice was a dry, scraping sound. Ilara, there was a change of plans." "Clearly," I said, my smile never wavering. I then turned my full, undivided attention to the 27-year-old woman beside him. She was staring at me, her eyes wide, finally sensing the danger she was in. I extended my right hand, my diamond necklace sparkling under the soft lights. "Hello," I said, my voice warm, as if I were meeting a new client. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I am Ilara Vance." I let the name hang in the air for a beat, watching her process it. Her eyes flickered to Marcus, then back to me. "I am the Vice President of Strategy here at Astra Analytics," I continued, "and the host of this evening's summit." I paused, letting the weight of my title settle on her. "And, of course, I am Marcus's wife." Her face was a spectacular, rapid-fire collapse. The color drained, leaving blotchy patches of red on her neck. Her perfectly glossed mouth fell open. "Wife," she whispered. It was the smallest, most pathetic sound. She looked at Marcus, her gaze turning from confusion to a sharp, accusing fury. "Wife," she repeated, her voice cracking. Marcus put a hand out. "Ilara, this is not the time. We should not be doing this here." "Nonsense," I said, cutting him off, my smile brightening even further, turning positively radiant. I turned back to Chloe, my entire demeanor shifting to one of shared, bubbling excitement. "But you must be Chloe Davis." Her head snapped back to me, her fury eclipsed by fresh confusion. How do you know my name?" "How?" I feigned surprise. "My goodness, we're all so thrilled you're here. Congratulations." She just stared at me, completely lost. "Congratulations. For what?" "The award, darling," I said, my voice projecting just enough for the people nearby to turn. "Your Industry Rising Star Award. The committee was just so impressed. We are all so incredibly excited to be honoring you tonight." Chloe was paralyzed, her small, shocked "for what?" hanging in the air. She was staring at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. An award. Here it was a data point so unexpected it had short-circuited her brain. Marcus, however, was not confused. He was a creature of finance, a man who understood risk and leverage. He saw the board. He saw the pieces I had laid. His face, which had been pale with shock, now flushed with a dark, desperate anger. He understood that this was not a chaotic encounter. This was an ambush. Ilara, he hissed, his voice low and venomous, dropping all pretense. Stop it. Don't you dare do this here. I turned my brilliant, unbothered smile back to him. Do what, my love? I asked, my voice light and airy. Introductions. We're just being polite. I glanced around at the curious onlookers who were beginning to stare. We can't just lurk by the bar all night. It's rude. Before either of them could react, I moved. I stepped smoothly between them and looped my arms through both of theirs, one on his elbow, one on hers. My grip was firm, friendly, immovable. Chloe flinched at my touch, her skin clammy. Marcus tried to pull away, but he was trapped by the social contract of the room. To make a scene was to lose, and he already knew he was losing. Come on, I said, my voice projecting cheerful authority. You absolutely must come and say hello to your boss. I began to walk, propelling them forward. It was, I reflected, exactly like leading two lambs to the slaughter. We moved as a grotesque parody of a happy trio, a wife graciously escorting her husband and his guest. The walk across that grand ballroom was the longest of their lives. With every step, more heads turned. I was the host, the woman from the stage. He was the handsome, unidentified man, and she was the young, beautiful, and now utterly terrified other woman. I could feel the tremors running through her arm. Marcus was rigid, his jaw clenched so tight I was surprised his teeth didn't crack. I kept up a steady stream of pleasantries. The turnout is wonderful. Isn't it? Eris was so pleased. Oh, look, there's the senator's wife. I must introduce you later, Chloe. She'll be fascinated by your work. We reached the head table, the VIP section right at the foot of the stage. Dr. Thorne, my CEO, was there, and Mr. Harding, Marcus's boss, was seated right next to him, his wife Eleanor beside him. Mr. Harding, I called out, my voice ringing with joyous reunion. Harding looked up from his conversation, a polite smile on his face. I dropped their arms, presenting them. Look who made it, I beamed. It's Marcus. Turns out he wasn't trapped in Chicago after all. Isn't that wonderful? Harding's polite smile vanished. He slowly, very slowly, placed his napkin on the table and stood up. He was a tall, imposing man, and his expression was one of profound, cold displeasure. He stared at my husband. Vance, Harding said, his voice a low rumble. What the hell is going on? Marcus opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just stood there, pinned by his boss's gaze. He's full of surprises tonight, I chimed in, stepping in to fill the silence. And he even brought one of your own. Mr. Harding. He brought a +1, one of your brightest stars. Chloe Davis. I gestured to Chloe, who looked as if she might faint. She's our Special Industry Rising Star Award recipient tonight. I finished, clasping my hands together. This was the final piece of data. Eleanor Harding, a sharp, astute woman who ran half of Boston's charities, looked at Chloe's mortified face. She looked at Marcus's barely concealed panic. She looked at my bright, unwavering smile. And in an instant, she understood everything. Her face, a mask of polite society seconds before, contorted into an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. Harding, however, was not focused on the social drama. He was focused on the corporate one. His eyes narrowed, fixed on Marcus. Vance, he said, and his voice cut through the air. You told my office you were taking personal leave, a family emergency. What, exactly, are you doing here, at your wife's professional event, with a junior analyst from your division? They were trapped, utterly. In front of them, Marcus's furious boss. To their left, my own CEO, Dr. Thorne, who was now watching the exchange with a sharp, analytical, what the hell is happening expression. All around them, the most powerful people in the city. There was no exit. There was no escape. There was only the bright, warm spotlight I had so carefully prepared for them. As if summoned by a higher power, the master of ceremonies for the evening, a local tech celebrity I'd hired, stepped onto the stage. And now, his voice boomed, we have a very special presentation, a new award for this year's summit, the Industry Rising Star Award, the recipient, Ms. Chloe Davis. The spotlight, which had mercifully moved on, snapped back and found her. It was a brutal, perfect tableau. Chloe Davis, frozen in horror, standing between the furious, towering CEO of her company and the silent, smiling wife of her lover. Chloe, come on up, the MC encouraged. She had no choice. To refuse was to create an even bigger scene. Shaking, her face a mess of splotchy red and white, she stumbled forward, walking the green mile from the VIP table to the stage. She was forced to walk past me. I smiled, a small, encouraging, you've got this gesture. She accepted the heavy glass trophy with a trembling hand, mumbling something incoherent. As she turned to flee, I stood up from my chair at the head table and walked to the auxiliary microphone we had placed there for VIP comments. Let's give her another round of applause, I said, my voice ringing through the room. The entire ballroom, oblivious, dutifully clapped. We are just so thrilled. Chloe was nominated by her senior mentor at Bayfront, a man who saw in her, well, just such special potential. The room clapped again, a polite, appreciative sound. Chloe, holding her prize, looked like she was going to be sick. Marcus, seeing his entire life imploding, made a move. He started to turn, a quiet, desperate attempt to slip away into the crowd. He didn't take 2 steps before Mr. Harding's hand shot out and gripped his arm like a steel trap. You're staying right here. After what felt like an eternity, Chloe stumbled back to the table, her face ashen. She looked at the award in her hand as if it were a bomb. Mr. Harding, without another word, looked at Marcus, then at Chloe, and jerked his head toward the lobby. Both of you, now. He didn't just escort them, he herded them. He pushed them through the crowd toward the main exit. I watched them go. I watched my husband, his shoulders slumped in utter defeat, and his mistress, now openly crying, being frog-marched out of my event by their boss. I knew, with the cold certainty of a data analyst, that I had just witnessed the end of both of their careers. I returned to my home in Beacon Hill at 2 a.m. The brownstone was silent, dark, and empty. He wasn't there. He was, I assumed, at his penthouse, or perhaps a hotel, trying to figure out how to salvage the wreckage. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked to my home office, to the secure, fireproof safe hidden behind a false panel. I entered the code and it opened with a heavy, satisfying click. I took out the thick file of documents Julian Croft had prepared for me, but I also took out something else. The final variable, a small, black USB drive. The anonymous email hadn't just given me a location, it had come with a follow-up. The sender, clearly a bitter, passed-over rival at Bayfront Capital, had provided a data log. It was proof that Marcus hadn't just stolen our money for the penthouse. He had funded the purchase by executing a trade based on non-public information. He had used an insider tip about a merger, a crime I was certain he'd committed, and the emailer had given me the receipts. It wasn't just adultery. It was a federal crime. I went to the dining room, turned on the single lamp over the large mahogany table, and I waited. He finally stumbled in at 4 a.m. His suit was rumpled, his tie was gone, and he looked like a man who had aged 20 years in 8 hours. Ilara, he croaked, his voice raw. Ilara, we need to talk. I looked up from my file. I'm glad you think so. On the polished wood in front of me, I had laid out 2 piles. On the left, the divorce papers. They gave me everything. The house, our cash accounts, and a lien against his assets for the $400,000 he had stolen from our brokerage account. On the right, I placed the small USB drive and a single printed-out summary of its contents. He stared at the table, his eyes trying to process what he was seeing. You have two options, I said, my voice perfectly calm, perfectly quiet. You are going to sign these divorce papers. You will agree to every single term, and you will be out of my house by noon. Or, I paused, tapping the USB drive with one finger. I will send this to my contact at the Securities and Exchange Commission at 8 a.m. You will lose your license, your reputation, and you will very likely go to prison. I leaned back. You choose. He didn't speak. He just stared at the table, the full, catastrophic weight of his actions finally landing on him. He had lost his wife. He had lost his mistress. He had lost his job. And now, he had lost his freedom. He put his hands on the table and his entire body just collapsed. I picked up the glass of water I had waiting, took a calm, measured sip, and watched. Thank you for listening to my story. Please comment below and let me know where you're listening from. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it some extra love by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.